A commonly discussed topic amongst coaster enthusiasts is the ranking of coaster lineups, and no one can ever seem to agree aside from the top two. Today, I present a solution to this problem where I have made a comprehensive list of the best coaster lineups using numbers. The quality of a park's coasters can be difficult to quantify, but I believe I have made a good attempt to do just that. There is no shortage of videos on YouTube about ranking the best coaster lineups. Some of these go purely based off opinion, others have parks fight each other, and there was a blog post that I will talk about later in this video that attempted to use numbers but made a small mistake in my opinion. I figured there had to be a better way to do this, so after playing around in Excel for a bit, I came up with what I believe to be a relatively accurate list of the best coaster lineups across the world. Obviously, this isn't the end-all be-all list for coaster lineups, and you may feel free to disagree with the list. Heck, even I disagree with some of the placements on the list. But what I will give myself credit for is that the list makes a great attempt to put numbers on something that isn't meant to have numbers attached to it. First, I'll talk about some previous methods that have been used to score coaster lineups in the past. Then, I will jump into some data analytics and explain how my method of scoring parks actually works. Then, I will go through the full top 20 list of which parks the numbers said have the best coaster lineups. I do recommend watching the first half of this video so the numbers at the end make more sense, but if you desire to skip right to the top 20 list, please check the timestamps. And with all that said, let's dive right in. The most common method for ranking coasters is just purely based off opinion. By opinion, I mean by saying Park A is better than Park B because they have roller coasters A, B, and C. This is perfectly fine, it's just not my cup of tea being a numbers person myself. If people can't agree on which coasters are better than each other, then it'll be nearly impossible for people to agree which parks are better than each other, since parks have many different coasters that people will disagree on. The following questions show why opinion matters that much more when talking about parks. Would you rather go to a park with one amazing RMC or a park with 3 B&Ms? Would you rather go to a park with the best coaster in the world or a park with the second best coaster in the world in a family ride? There are no right answers to these questions, and this is why coaster lineups introduce so much opinion. My model did its best to try to account for these types of questions. The second method I've seen used is park versus park battles, and this is not a great way to determine which parks are better than each other. I'm going to use Airtime Thrills' Cedar Point versus Magic Mountain video as an example. A link will be in the description. There are two battles that perfectly summarize the issue with this method, and these are Goliath versus Millennium Force and Gold Rusher versus Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Airtime Thrills gives Millennium Force the point over Goliath, and Gold Rusher the point over Cedar Creek Mine Ride. I would say most of you, including myself, agree with this. The problem is that these victories are both worth 1 point. I don't know about you guys, but I think the gap between Millennium Force and Goliath is a little bit bigger than the gap between Gold Rusher and Cedar Creek Mine Ride. If you had to choose between a park that had Millennium Force and Cedar Creek Mine Ride and a park that had Goliath and Gold Rusher, I think the choice is pretty obvious. I'm going with Millennium Force and Cedar Creek Mine Ride. And for me, it's not even close. The park battle approach would say these two hypothetical parks are exactly equal because Millennium Force is better than Goliath and Gold Rusher is better than Cedar Creek Mine Ride. However, in my opinion, Millennium Force and Cedar Creek Mine Ride are far superior to Goliath and Gold Rusher. Using numbers fixes this problem by giving every ride its own distinct value based on its quality, and not just a value of 1 or 0 depending on if it won its battle or not. After looking at the problems I just talked about with the two most common ways of ranking lineups, I decided to see if there was some numerical way to assign each coaster a value that represented the quality of the ride. In other words, give coasters a score, and a higher score means a better ride. To do this, I needed some kind of world list of the best coasters from first to last. This is where Captain Coaster comes in. Captain Coaster is a website that takes user input to make a full list of the best roller coasters in the world, with the exception of kiddie coasters. When I first found the website, I was very impressed to see how well the list represented the opinion of the coaster community. To briefly explain, what it does is it takes two coasters, then goes through every user to see which is ranked higher. For example, if the site takes Steel Vengeance and Cedar Creek Mine Ride, it first checks to see which users have ridden both. Then, it counts how many people prefer Steel Vengeance to Cedar Creek Mine Ride, and vice versa. Whichever coaster is preferred by more users, that coaster wins. Every coaster is matched up with hundreds of other coasters, and whichever coaster wins the most of its duels is number 1. Whichever coaster wins the second most of its duels is number 2, so on and so forth. If you want to learn more about how Captain Coaster ranks the world's coasters, please go to their website. A link is in the description. What makes this website so amazing is that if you disagree with the rankings that will be shown later in this video, you can go create an account and create your own list of your favorite roller coasters. Your opinion will then be used in the next set of duels, which happen at the end of every month. The more users that use Captain Coaster, the better the rankings get. So please, if you don't already have a Captain Coaster account, please go make one. By making one, you will not only help improve this list of coaster lineups, but also the world coaster rankings. This is not an ad for Captain Coaster or anything, just a testament to the brilliance of their website. I decided that to determine how parks score against one another, I had to find a way to score coasters against one another. I figured this could be accomplished by using the Captain Coaster rankings. Through some trial and error, I came up with these numbers that I believe reasonably give coasters a score based on their world ranking. These numbers are as follows. I decided that first place should be worth 10 points, Second place should be worth 9.95 points. 50th place should be worth 7 points. 200th place should be worth 4 points. And 1000th place should be worth half a point. Finally, rides determined to be kiddie coasters by Captain Coaster are not ranked, and thus I have no choice but to give them a score of 0. I decided on these numbers for a variety of reasons. Firstly, the gap between the second and first place coaster is much bigger than the gap between the 1000th and 1001st place coaster. Secondly, it allows a world-class coaster to score much higher than a meh thrill coaster. Thirdly, it would take an extreme amount of family coasters or bad thrill coasters for a park to have a higher total than a park with just one elite coaster. These are all ideas that I believe most enthusiasts would agree with. I did experiment with the idea of giving negative points for bad thrill coasters, but this became problematic because bad thrill rides are mixed in with decent family rides in the Captain Coaster World Rankings, and I didn't want a decent family ride to negatively impact a park's overall score. With a rough estimate of how many points I wanted the ranking of a coaster to score, I developed an equation that took a ride's rank and converted it to a score, and the results were pretty close to what I wanted. I call the numbers spat out by this equation the point index for roller coasters, which I will refer to in the video as a coaster's score, or points scored. The point index spits out the following scores. To better understand what these scores mean, I am using coasters that are familiar to all levels of enthusiast in this sample of the point index. The world ranking of 1, which at the time this video is being made is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point, scores 10 points. The world ranking of 2, which currently is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa, scores 9.95 points. Continuing on, a world rank of 3 scores 9.89 points, which is currently Velocicoaster. Rank 10 scores 9.53 points, which is currently Fury 325. Rank 26 scores 8.74 points, which is currently Skyrush. Jumping to the bottom, rank 999 scores 0.61 points, which is currently Trailblazer at Hershey Park. This hopefully gives you the general idea of how the point index works. To apply the point index to parks, all you have to do is total the point index scores for every coaster operating there. Totaling the point index scores for every coaster at a park is indicative of how strong a park's lineup truly is. In a blog post by Coaster Force user Matt N, which I highly recommend reading and will put a link in the description, he uses a similar method to mine, where he takes Captain Coaster rankings and converts it into a roller coaster's score. Naturally, his conversion method is a bit different than mine, but that doesn't mean his method is wrong by any means. A small disagreement that I had with this post, which ultimately inspired the point index, is that only the average, median, and quartiles are used to score parks lineups. The issue using the average creates is that a decent family ride can heavily bring down a park's average and thus affect their lineup's ranking. In my opinion, a park should not be punished, but rather lightly compensated for having good family rides, and then be more heavily compensated for a good thrill coaster. Matt N's list happens to just favor quality over quantity, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just happen to disagree. Just looking at his list using his Matt N formula, the only parks on here with double-digit coasters are Cedar Point and Magic Mountain. I know Matt N is trying to accomplish something slightly different with his post than I am trying to accomplish in this video, but I just wanted to use this as an example to show that taking the average point index score is not the best way to determine the final coaster lineup rankings. Again, all credit to Matt N on this post. It is definitely a read that is worth your time. Link in the description. Before I talk about the park rankings, there are 2 quick flaws in totaling the point index scores that I want to acknowledge. Firstly, dueling coasters count as 2 rides on Captain Coaster and have separate rankings, and thus have 2 separate scores. I considered a method of combining these 2 scores fairly, but ultimately I could not come up with one I liked, so if anyone has any good ideas on how to do this, please leave a comment and help me. Secondly, there is a park that kind of breaks the point index, and its score is a big overestimate in my opinion. And that park is Canada's Wonderland. If you take every ride at Canada's Wonderland that is not Leviathan, Yukon Striker, or Behemoth, the score of those rides adds to 8.34, which is the equivalent of Twisted Cyclone. The fact that a group of rides including Flight Deck, Time Warp, Dragonfire, Wild Beast, The Bat, and Silver Streak combined to equal Twisted Cyclone just doesn't sit right with me. To counteract parks that feature a similar problem as Canada's Wonderland, I created the Inside 500 Index, which I will explain shortly. We have now reached the rankings for the best coaster lineups on the planet using the point index. For every park, I kept track of 5 categories. The overall score, which is the point index of every ride added up, the number of scoreable coasters, the average by taking the overall score and dividing it by the number of scoreable coasters, the top 4, which is just the scores of the top 4 coasters at the park combined, and the aforementioned Inside 500, which is similar to the overall score, but only coasters inside the World Top 500 count towards the Inside 500 score. Before jumping into the top 20, first, some honorable mentions. Fuji-Q Highland with a score of 19.82 ranks 27th in the world. I was very surprised by it not making the rankings. Ijanika is ranked 7th in the world, scoring 9.68 points. But other than that, all their other thrill coasters fall flat. Doda Donpa, Fujiyama, and Takabisha all don't crack the top 200 on Captain Coaster. That and only having 5 scoreable coasters causes it to place so low. Dollywood with a score of 23.37 ranks 21st in the world, just barely missing the top 20. Similar to Fuji-Q, Lightning Rod ranks 6th in the world with a score of 9.73 points, but no other coaster they have cracks the top 200 on Captain Coaster. Their second best coaster is Thunderhead, ranking 215th with a score of 3.34 points. The lack of support for Lightning Rod and only having 8 scoreable roller coasters causes it to miss the top 20 despite having the 16th best average score in the world. Final honorable mention is Universal's Islands of Adventure. They get an honorable mention for having the best average score at 5.66 points. Such is the case when you only have 4 roller coasters and 3 of them, Velocicoaster, Hagrid's, and Incredible Hulk, have a score of over 5. Velocicoaster is obviously ranked the highest of the bunch, ranking 3rd in the world. Overall, Islands of Adventure places 22nd in the world with an overall score of 22.64. Now, jumping into the top 20 according to the Captain Coaster ranking for the month of January 2023. At number 20 is Europa Park with an overall score of 23.74. They have an average score of 1.98 with 12 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 16.65, which is worst on the list, and an Inside 500 of 18.05, also worst on the list. This park has a bunch of mid-tier thrill rides, such as Blue Fire, Silver Star, and Wodan. The quality of its family rides really helps push it onto this list, as it has no coasters below 1,000 on the world rankings. With the opening of Voltron in 2023, this park has potential to move up a few spots in the near future. At number 19 is Leesburg with a score of 24.06. They have an average score of 4.81 with only 5 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 23.47 and an Inside 500 of the same score. An impressive score for Leesburg for only having 5 coasters. Helix and Balder are both inside the world's top 100 and combine for a score of 15.81. Valkyria and Leesburg-Bonnen also contribute 4.64 and 3.03 points, respectively. Although they have the highest average on the list, this park suffers from having no depth, which is why it places 19th. At number 18 is Six Flags New England with an overall score of 24.09. They have an average score of 2.41 with 10 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 and Inside 500 of 20.21. This park is best known for their top 2 of Wicked Cyclone and Superman the Ride, which combine for 17.15 points by themselves. After that, there is a steep drop-off, with the next highest score being Batman the Dark Knight with 1.85 points. Their signature duo, along with a middling supporting cast, is why Six Flags New England makes the list. At number 17 is Nagashima Spa-Land with an overall score of 24.56. They have an average score of 2.23 with 11 scoreable roller coasters. They have a top 4 of 19.01 and an Inside 500 of the same score, so they have no coasters inside the top 500 in the world besides their top 4. Yes, I know, Nagashima Spa-Land made it and Fuji-Q didn't, but let me explain. Hakuge ranks 5th in the world and scores 9.79 points, which is a higher score than Ijunaika. Acrobat is Nagashima Spa-Land's next best coaster, ranking 174th in the world and scoring 4.07 points. According to Captain Coaster, this would make Acrobat the second best ride at Fuji-Q. After that, Steel Dragon 2000 cancels out Fujiyama, and Arashi also has a respectable score of 1.74. After that, Nagashima has depth such as Ultra Twister and Shuttle Loop that Fuji-Q just cannot counter with. Nagashima Spa-Land rightfully makes the list for having a world-class coaster in Hakuge, 2 other serviceable thrill rides, and solid lineup depth. At number 16 is Six Flags Over Georgia with an overall score of 25.87. They have an average score of 2.59 with 10 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 20.07 and an Inside 500 of 23.0. They have elite thrill coasters in Goliath and Twisted Cyclone, which combine for 15.23 points. They have supported cast thrill coasters in Batman the Ride, Superman Ultimate Flight, and Riddler Mindbender, which contribute 2.73, 1.76, and 2.12 points, respectively. They round this out with a nice collection of family rides and Love It, Hate It rides, and these all combine to place Six Flags Over Georgia 16th. At number 15 is Silver Dollar City with an overall score of 26.01. They have an average score of 4.33 with 6 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 24.56 and an Inside 500 of the same score. Dollywood and Silver Dollar City have long been joined at the hip in the coaster community. However, Silver Dollar City scores almost 3 points higher for one major reason: Time Traveler. Lightning Rod and Outlaw Run cancel out, but Dollywood has no answer for Time Traveler, which ranks 47th in the world and scores 7.82 points. The strong top 2 and supporting cast thrill rides in Powder Keg and Wildfire catapult Silver Dollar City into the top 20. Only having 6 scoreable coasters prevents it from moving up any further. At number 14 is Six Flags Great America with an overall score of 26.14. They have an average score of 2.1 with 14 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 17.48 and an inside 500 of 25.87. I was surprised to see how low this park placed, but once looking at the numbers, it makes sense. They have Goliath placing 51st, scoring 7.65, but after that, they have Max Force and Raging Bull, which each score around 3.6. They have X-Flight at 2.44, Batman the Ride at 2.63, and Superman Ultimate Flight at 2.0. The top 4 index shows the park's problem in the lineup, as they lack a second truly elite coaster unlike the parks above it, and even their best coaster, Goliath, is borderline world class. They do have many solid thrill coasters, which explains their top 500 score. With how Six Flags has been adding to this park, it has a solid chance to climb this list, although with our boy Salim at the helm, who knows what will happen. At number 13 is Canada's Wonderland with an overall score of 28.55. They have an average score of 1.78, which is worst on the list, with 16 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 21.19 and an inside 500 of 20.19. The fact that this park has 16 scoreable coasters and only 3 of them are in the world top 500 is kind of embarrassing. According to Captain Coaster, their 4th best coaster is Vortex, which is ranked 543rd in the world and scores 1.0. The only reason Canada's Wonderland is this high is because of their sheer quantity and above average top 3, which each score above 5.9 points. If there's any solace for Canada's Wonderland fans, you might be an RMC conversion of Mindbuster or Wild Beast away from being one of the elite coaster parks, depending on if RMC and Canada can settle their construction differences. At number 12 is Six Flags Fiesta Texas with an overall score of 29.31. They have an average score of 2.93 with 10 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 23.33 and an inside 500 of 26.26. This is another Six Flags park that shows a lot of promise, scoring the 3rd highest in the chain. They have a great collection of thrill coasters, led by Elite Thrill Coasters, Iron Rattler, and Wonder Woman Golden Lasso Coaster, scoring 8.6 and 7.49 respectively. Superman Krypton Coaster is also on the fringes of being elite, scoring 4.9 points. The addition of Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger moved this park up a few places as well. A well-deserved ranking for a quality park on the come-up. At number 11 is King's Dominion with an overall score of 30.03. They have an average score of 2.31 with 13 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 23.12 and an inside 500 of the same score. A similar story to Canada's Wonderland here, but at least they have 4 of their 13 coasters inside the top 500 instead of 3 of their 16. They also have one of the best duos in the world with Intimidator 305, which ranks 20th and scores 9.03 points, and Twisted Timbers, which ranks even higher at 15th and scores 9.27 points. So long as King's Dominion backs up their top 2 with decent thrill coasters, they will forever be on this list, as Cedar Point is the only other park that has 2 coasters break the top 20 in the world. Kicking off the top 10 is Fantasialand with an overall score of 31.47. They have an average score of 3.93 across 8 scoreable roller coasters. They have a top 4 of 25.22 and an inside 500 of 29.24. The inside 500 index really tells the story for this park, as only 2 of their 8 scoreable coasters are outside the top 500 in the world. This park is led by Terran, Fly, and Black Mamba, which combine for a score of 22.8, and a park with those 3 alone would have almost cracked the top 20. This park does benefit, however, from Winges being considered 2 separate coasters in the work rankings, but there's not much I can really do to fix that as of now. At number 9 is Carowinds with an overall score of 31.54. They have an average score of 2.43 with 13 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 25.77 and an inside 500 of the same score. This park shares the problem with King's Dominion of having only 4 of their 13 coasters inside the top 500, but what puts Carowinds higher than King's Dominion is that these 4 coasters are all really dang good. So much so that the lowest of the bunch is Intimidator, which still ranks 144th and scores 4.73 points. They also have Copperhead Strike and Afterburn, which combine for 11.51 points. In their prized possession, Fury 325 ranks 10th in the world, scoring 9.53 points. If the RMC conversion of Hurler ever ends up happening down the line, this park can enter the conversation as one of the best lineups in the world. At number 8 is Energylandia with an overall score of 33.63. They have an average score of 2.8 with 12 scoreable roller coasters. They have a top 4 of 27.19 and an inside 500 of 28.67. You may be curious why Energylandia only has 12 scoreable coasters when RCDB says they have 17. Well, Captain Coaster says that 5 of their coasters are kiddie coasters and thus score 0 points. The kiddie coaster capital of the world also happens to have some pretty good thrill rides as well. Zydra ranks 4th and scores 9.84, Hyperion ranks 24th and scores 8.84, and Abyssus ranks 125th and scores 5.21. Energylandia has an excellent top 4, but it's ultimately all the coasters that are outside of that prevent it from moving up any further. However, with how fast they've been expanding, a potential top 3 spot is not out of the question for this park. Also, fun fact, this park has the worst coaster in the Captain Coaster database. Viking Roller Coaster ranking 1,559th, scoring 0.58 points. At number 7 is Busch Gardens Williamsburg with an overall score of 34.51. They have an average score of 3.83 with 9 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 25.83 and an inside 500 of a staggering 33.93 points. The only scoreable roller coaster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg that ranks outside the top 500 is Grover's Alpine Express. Pantheon is the highest ranking of the bunch, ranking 30th and scoring 8.56. Griffin, Alpengeist, Apollo's Chariot, and Verbolten are the next best contributors. One of the world's deepest collections of thrill rides is appropriately rewarded with a spot in the top 10. At number 6, beating out his brother in crime, is Busch Gardens Tampa with an overall score of 36.47. They have an average score of 3.65 with 10 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 27.65 and an inside 500 of 34.38. Yes, Tampa has one more coaster than Williamsburg, but the real reason why Tampa beats Williamsburg is actually much sadder. Iron Gwazi is ranked 2nd in the world, scoring 9.95 points. Pantheon scores 8.56 points. Iron Gwazi beats Pantheon by 1.38 points, and Tampa is ahead of Williamsburg by 1.96 points. The difference in quality of their 2022 editions represents most of the gap between these two parks. I'll leave it at that. At number 5 is Kings Island with an overall score of 37.598. They have an average score of 2.69 with 14 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 25.6 and an inside 500 of 31.09. 3 coasters inside the World Top 100. 2 more inside the World Top 200. Yeah, this park is going to score pretty high. Mystic Timbers and Orion lead the way, being ranked 64th and 63rd and both scoring around 7.16 points. These two are supported by Diamondback scoring 6.47 points, Banshee scoring 4.8 points, and the Beast scoring 3.98 points. Kings Island has long been a contending park for the world's best coaster lineup, and hopefully whatever takes the place of Vortex improves their score even further. At number 4 is Hershey Park with an overall score of 37.602. They have an average score of 2.89 with 13 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 25.01 and an inside 500 of 33.98. Hershey Park and Kings Island frequently flip-flop when the rankings change on Captain Coaster. In January of 2023, these two parks were so close together that I had to expand each of their overall scores at 3 decimal places to determine which one placed higher. However, with Hershey Park opening Wildcats Revenge in 2023, they appear to be taking the lead over Kings Island for good for at least the foreseeable future. In fact, Wildcats Revenge, which I project to be a top 50 coaster, would put Hershey Park firmly in 3rd place in the world. If Wildcats Revenge ends up being as good as advertised, Hershey's overall score would actually be closer to that of Cedar Point than the current 3rd place park, which is fascinating to think about. Their top coasters need no introduction, as Skyrush, Stormrunner, and Candymonium are all inside the World Top 100, scoring 8.74, 6.33, and 6.27 points respectively. In addition, Fahrenheit and Great Bear are great supporting thrill coasters, both scoring above 3.5. At number 3 is Six Flags Great Adventure with an overall score of 40.40. They have an average of 3.11 with 13 scoreable coasters. They have a top 4 of 28.3 and an inside 500 of 37.22. As of when this video is being made, this ranking has a big asterisk next to it. El Toro, which is closed indefinitely, is ranked 11th in the world, scoring 9.48 points. Removing El Toro will put this park at 11th, which is still a very impressive score all things considered. Most parks would fall much further if their best ride was removed. Great Adventure boasts an incredible top 4, with the aforementioned El Toro, Jersey Devil scoring 6.6, Nitro scoring 6.57, and Kinda Ka scoring 5.65. This park is not usually credited with this good of a lineup, but the numbers behind it do not lie. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Cedar Point versus Six Flags Magic Mountain. Which park does the point index say is better? Can Magic Mountain take advantage of a closed top thrill dragster and outscore Cedar Point? It's a place like no other versus Six Flags' spoiled baby. Who's going to win? Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California defeats Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio by an overall score of 51.86 to 49.54. Why does Six Flags Magic Mountain take the victory here? I believe it all comes down to Six Flags Magic Mountain having more quality thrill coasters than Cedar Point. The quantity of Magic Mountain is able to outperform Cedar Point's elite top 3 of 1st ranked Steel Vengeance, 13th ranked Maverick, and 37th ranked Millennium Force. As hinted at by the Inside 500 score, Magic Mountain slightly beats Cedar Point because they have 7 coasters ranked between 300 and 500, where Cedar Point only has 2 in this range. Rides like Batman the Ride, West Coast Racers, Goliath, Riddler's Revenge, Apocalypse, Scream, and Superman Escape from Krypton all add up to be big contributors. If there's any solace for Cedar Point fans, if Top Bill Dragster is open, Cedar Point's score moves up to 57.62, and they beat Magic Mountain by 6 points. Do what you will with that information. That wraps up the world's best coaster lineups using numbers. Let me know your thoughts on the point index and these rankings in the comments below, as I am always looking for ways to improve this. As the Captain Coaster rankings update, this list will change, so I will definitely be revisiting this topic in the future. Also, if your home park wasn't in this video and you want to know how it scored, please leave a comment and I'll try my best to respond to you. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.